Here's a study that should bother you. Dalbar tracked regular investors for 30 years and found something painful. The average person who bought stocks earned about 5 percentage points less each year than the market itself. Not because the market failed them, because their own decisions did. And it gets worse. When the FINRA Foundation gave new investors a simple 5-question quiz about investing basics, most of them failed it. But here's the finding that says the most. Fidelity looked at which of its customer accounts performed best. The winners weren't traders or experts. They were people who had forgotten their accounts even existed. Read that again. The best investors were the ones who did nothing at all. The gap between people who build wealth and people who stay stuck isn't intelligence. It isn't luck. And it isn't some secret the rich are hiding. It's this. Beginners do what feels exciting, and wealth builders do what feels boring. That's the whole difference. So this chapter won't give you a hot stock tip. You don't need one. What you need is to stop bleeding money in 10 specific places. Quiet leaks that drain your accounts year after year, while you're busy looking for the next big thing. I'll walk you through all 10 mistakes, and each one comes with a fix. Fair warning, these fixes are dull. None of them will ever trend, and none will look impressive on social media. That's exactly why they work. To make this easier, meet Marcus. He's a smart guy with a good job, and he's making every single one of these mistakes right now. As we go, you'll watch him get corrected, step by step. Learn from his missteps, and you'll skip years of expensive lessons. Section 1. Marcus has been about to start investing for 3 years. Every time he opens the app, he sees a reason to wait. The market looks high. The news sounds scary. He tells himself he'll jump in when things settle down. He thinks he's being careful. He's actually making the 2 most expensive mistakes in this entire book, waiting to start and trying to time the market. Let's put a price tag on waiting. Say you invest $300 a month starting at age 25, earning an average of 8% a year. By 65, you'd have roughly $1 million. Start the exact same plan at 35, and you end up with around $440,000. Same money going in each month, same returns. But those 10 missed years cost you more than $500,000. That's not a typo. That's how compounding works. The early money does the heavy lifting, and no amount of catching up later can fully replace it. Now, the timing part. Charles Schwab ran a famous study comparing different types of investors over 20 years. One had perfect timing, buying at the lowest point every single year. One had terrible timing, buying at the peak every year. And one just sat in cash, waiting for the right moment. Here's the shock. Even the world's worst market timer ended up far ahead of the person who stayed in cash. Being in the market badly beat being out of it. Let that sink in. But the market's at an all-time high, Marcus says. Here's what he doesn't know. All-time highs are normal. The market spends much of its history near record levels because growth is what it does over time. Highs are often followed by more highs. Waiting for a crash means guessing. And Schwab's study just showed you that even bad buyers beat guessers. So here's the fix. And yes, it's boring. Set up an automatic transfer into your investment account for the day after payday. Not the end of the month, when the money's already gone. The day after it lands. Then leave it alone. Do this, and something shifts in how you see yourself. You're no longer the person deciding whether to invest each month. You're the person who is always in the market, never guessing, never watching the news for a signal. Marcus just set up his first transfer. 10 years late, but he's in. Section 2. Now that Marcus is finally in the market, he's made a new plan. He's going to pick winners. He's been reading a forum where everyone seems to be getting rich off one hot stock, and he's convinced he's spotted the next big thing. This is where mistakes 3 and 4 show up together, picking individual stocks and chasing whatever's trending. Before you judge Marcus, Look at the professionals. Every year, S&P publishes a report called the SPIVA scorecard. It compares full-time fund managers, people with finance degrees, research teams, and expensive software against a simple index that just tracks the whole market. Over 15 years, roughly 90% of these professionals fail to beat that plain index. 9 out of 10. These are people who do this for a living, working full days with tools you'll never have. So walk the ladder down with me. If trained professionals lose to the index 9 times out of 10, what chance does a beginner have? And what chance does a beginner have when his research is a forum post written by a stranger? Marcus isn't competing against other beginners. Every time he buys a stock, someone is selling it to him. And that someone is often a professional with far more information. He's not playing the game. He's the person the game is played on. The cost adds up quietly. Take $10,000 over 20 years. In a broad index fund earning 8%, that grows to about $46,000. Now trail the market by just 2 points a year, through bad picks, bad timing, and higher fees, and you end up near $32,000. That's $14,000 gone, and you'd never see it leave. Underperformance doesn't send you a bill, it just quietly shrinks your future. Marcus learned this the loud way. His meme stock doubled in a week, then lost 70% in a month. He rode it all the way down, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. The fix is one sentence. Buy one broad index fund that owns the whole market, and stop. That's it. No watch lists, no forums, no hot tips. When you own the index, you own a small piece of every major company at once. You stop betting against the market and simply become a part owner of it. Marcus sold what was left of his meme stock and moved it into the index. Boring. And finally winning. Section 3. Marcus is finally in an index fund. So he thinks the hard part is over. But 2 silent leaks are still draining his account. And they're the kind you never feel. Fees and taxes. Nobody sends you a receipt for these mistakes. They just skim a little off the top, year after year, for decades. Start with fees. Every fund charges something called an expense ratio, a small percentage taken out of your money each year, whether the fund goes up or down. It sounds tiny, 1%. Who cares? The SEC cares enough that it published a bulletin warning investors about exactly this. Over an investing lifetime, a 1% difference in fees can cost you 6 figures. Vanguard's own math shows why. At 8% growth, a fund charging 0.05% lets you keep almost everything. A fund charging 1% quietly takes a huge slice of your compounding, because the fee doesn't just remove money, it removes all the future growth that money would have earned. Over 30 or 40 years, that slow leak becomes a flood. Marcus checked his fund and winced. He'd picked one charging 0.9% when a nearly identical index fund charged 0.04%. Same market, same returns. One of them just kept more of his money for itself. Now taxes, or more exactly, the accounts you invest inside. Think of accounts as containers. The investment can be identical, but the container decides how much the government takes. A regular account gets taxed along the way. A 401k or a Roth IRA shields your money, so it can grow with far less drag. And if your employer matches your 401k contributions, that match is free money. Skipping it is like turning down part of your salary. So here's the order. First, contribute enough to your 401k to get the full match. Then fund a Roth IRA. Only after those are handled does a regular account make sense. I know what you're thinking. This sounds complicated. It isn't. It's 2 account names and 1 number. Check that your fund's expense ratio is under 0.2%. Fill the 401k match, then the Roth. That's the whole job. and you do it once. Marcus switched funds and turned on his match in one lunch break. Nothing about it felt exciting. But he just gave himself a six-figure raise, spread over the rest of his life. Section 4. The market drops 8% in a week, and Marcus does what feels natural. He checks his account. Then he checks it again an hour later. By Friday, he's checking it before breakfast, at lunch, and in bed. And when the news runs a headline about a possible crash, he does the thing that feels safest in the moment. He sells everything. Mistakes 7 and 8 travel together like this: panic selling and the daily checking habit that feeds it. Here's what panic selling actually costs. JP Morgan studied 20 years of market returns and found something that should stop you cold. If you missed just the 10 best days in the market over those 2 decades, your total returns were cut roughly in half. 10 days out of about 5,000. And here's the cruel twist. Most of those best days happen right next to the worst ones, often within a week or two of a big drop. So the moment Marcus sold in fear was the moment he was most likely to miss the recovery. People who panic sell don't just lock in their losses, they almost always miss the bounce, because nobody rings a bell when it's time to get back in. Remember Fidelity's finding from the start of this chapter. The best performing accounts belong to people who forgot they existed. Now you can see why. Those investors never saw the scary headlines, never felt the drops, and never got the chance to sabotage themselves. Their secret wasn't knowledge, it was distance. Checking daily destroys that distance. The market falls on almost half of all trading days, so the more often you look, the more losses you feel, and the more chances fear gets to talk you into a bad decision. Watching your account every day is like weighing yourself every hour and panicking at each blip. The daily noise means nothing. The 20-year direction means everything. The fix has 2 parts, and both are almost embarrassingly simple. First, write one line somewhere you'll see it. I sell based on my plan, not the news. That sentence is your seatbelt. Second, delete the investing app from your home screen. Not your account, just the shortcut. Check once a month or once a quarter. Marcus wrote his rule on a sticky note and buried the app in a folder. Next crash, the market will shake. He won't. Section 5. Marcus is doing almost everything right now. Automatic transfers, one index fund, low fees, the app buried in a folder. But his foundation has 2 cracks in it, and either one could bring the whole thing down. He has no emergency fund, and he's carrying a credit card balance at 24% interest. These are the last 2 mistakes, and they might be the most dangerous, because they can undo every good move you've made. Start with the emergency fund. The Federal Reserve runs a yearly survey on household finances, and one finding shows up again and again. A large share of Americans couldn't cover a surprise $400 expense with cash. Think about what that means for an investor. Your car breaks down, or a medical bill lands, and there's no cash buffer. So where does the money come from? Your investments. And emergencies don't check the market first. If stocks are down 20% that month, you're forced to sell anyway, turning a temporary paper loss into a real, permanent one. This is how investors lose money in downturns, even when they never panicked. Life panicked for them. An emergency fund isn't separate from your investing plan. It's the wall that protects it. Now, the debt. Marcus's credit card charges 24% a year. His index fund earns about 8% on average. And that 8% isn't promised. The 24% is. Every month he carries that balance. He's guaranteed to lose 24% on that money while hoping to make 8. No portfolio on earth outruns that math. Here's the reframe that finally clicked for Marcus. Paying off a 24% credit card is the same as earning a 24% return, guaranteed, tax-free, with 0 risk. It's the single best investment available to anyone carrying that debt, and it never trends on any forum. So here's the order. First, stack 1 month of expenses in a plain savings account. That's your fire extinguisher. Second, attack the high-interest debt, anything charging more than about 8%, until it's gone. Third, with the buffer built and the leak sealed, invest hard, and let everything you've learned in this chapter compound in peace. Marcus paused his extra investing for 6 months, built the buffer, and killed the card. It felt like going backward. It was actually the strongest foundation he'd ever poured. Section 6. Let's do something most people never do. Add it all up. One mistake at a time. These leaks feel small. Together, they tell a different story. So let's put a realistic yearly price tag on each one for a typical beginner. Someone earning a normal salary, investing a few $100s a month, and making these mistakes the way Marcus did. Waiting to start and sitting in cash during scary stretches. Based on the gap between market returns and cash, call it $1,500 a year in missed growth. Picking stocks and chasing trends, trailing the index by a couple of points the way most stock pickers do, another $1,000. Paying 1% in fees instead of 0.05%, around $500 a year on a modest portfolio, and growing every year as the account gets bigger. Losing returns to the wrong account types and unnecessary taxes, another $800. One panic sell that misses part of a recovery, averaged out over time, easily $1,200 a year. Getting forced to sell during a downturn because there was no emergency fund, call it $500, and carrying a $5,000 credit card balance at 24%, that's $1,200 a year in interest, guaranteed. Add it up and you land somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000 a year. Let's use $7,000, a middle, defensible number. Annoying, sure, but here's where it turns painful. That $7,000 isn't just lost once. It's lost every single year. And every lost dollar also loses all the growth it would have earned. So run it through the same compounding math we've used all chapter. $7,000 a year, growing at 8%, over a 30-year investing life. The total comes to roughly $790,000. Read that number slowly. Nearly $800,000. Not stolen, not crashed, not lost in some disaster you could point to. Just quietly leaked away through 10 ordinary mistakes that felt harmless in the moment. That is the invisible price of exciting investing. It never shows up on a statement. There's no alert, no bill, no moment where you feel it leave. You simply arrive at retirement with half the life you paid for. Here's the flip side, and it's the whole point of this chapter. That $790,000 is still on the table. Every fix you've read, the automation, the index fund, the low fees, the buffer, is you buying it back. Section 7. At this point, you might be wondering if this boring approach actually produces wealthy people, or if it's just something cautious writers like to preach. Fair question. So let's stop talking about mistakes and look at the people who got it right. Ramsey Solutions ran the largest study of millionaires ever done, surveying more than 10,000 of them across the country. Not lottery winners, not tech founders, ordinary people who quietly crossed the $1 million line. And what the study found should reshape how you picture wealth in this country. First, 79% of these millionaires received no inheritance at all. Nothing from parents, nothing from relatives. 8 in 10 built it from a paycheck, the same tool you have. So the story that wealth is something you're handed doesn't survive contact with the data. Second, their average timeline to millionaire status was around 28 years. Read that number next to everything Marcus tried in this chapter. No hot stock made them rich in a year. No trend, no perfect trade, no lucky bet. Just steady investing across nearly 3 decades. almost the exact 30-year window we used in our compounding math. The people who actually reached $1 million weren't sprinting. They were letting time do the work, while everyone else searched for shortcuts. And third, here's the detail that should make you smile. Their number one wealth-building vehicle was the boring employer retirement plan, the 401k, the account with the match we covered in Section 3. Not private deals, not crypto, not real estate empires. The dullest account in personal finance built more millionaires in that study than anything else. Now look back at the list of 10 mistakes. These millionaires started early instead of waiting. They stayed in the market instead of timing it. They used broad, low-cost funds inside tax-advantaged accounts. They didn't panic in crashes. You can't invest for 28 straight years if every downturn shakes you out. They kept cash buffers and stayed clear of expensive debt. Without ever reading this chapter, they avoided nearly every mistake in it. That's what this study really is. A certificate for everything you've just learned. The boring path isn't a theory or an opinion. It's the documented, most common road that real millionaires actually walked. Marcus doesn't have to hope this works. 10,000 people already proved it does. All that's left is to follow them. Section 8. Look back at the 10 mistakes one more time, and you'll notice something they all share. Waiting for the perfect moment. Timing the market. Picking hot stocks. Chasing trends. Ignoring the small stuff like fees. Selling when it hurts. Skipping the boring foundation work. Every single one is the same mistake, wearing a different costume, a shortcut, a way to skip the slow part and jump to the reward. That's the flip most people never see. These were never really money mistakes. They were shortcuts. And wealth is simply what happens when you stop taking them. Marcus finally understands this. He didn't need to get smarter. He needed to stop looking for a faster road. Every fix in this chapter, the automatic transfer, the index fund, the low fee, the buried app, the cash buffer, is just the long road. Accepted. None of it requires talent. All of it requires patience. Which brings us back to where we started. Remember Fidelity's forgotten accounts. The best performing investors weren't the smartest people. They weren't the most informed, the most connected, or the most active. They were the most boring. So boring, they forgot they were investing at all. That finding felt like a joke at the beginning of this chapter. Now you can see it's the entire lesson, told in one stat. The market rewards the people who leave it alone. So here's the line to carry with you. Boring builds wealth. Exciting is what costs $790,000. And the disciplined path, the dull, automatic, unglamorous one, is the path your future self will thank you for taking. Not next month. In 30 years, when the compounding you set in motion today shows up as freedom, don't try to fix all 10 mistakes tonight. Do 3 things instead, and do them before this week ends. 1. Automate a single transfer into your investment account. Set for the day after payday. Any amount counts. The habit matters more than the number. 2. Check one expense ratio on whatever fund you own, and make sure it's under 0.2%. 3. Delete one app from your home screen. You know which one. 3 small moves. 10 minutes. Total. Nothing about them will feel impressive, and no one will applaud. That's exactly how you'll know you're finally doing it right. Marcus started there. Now it's your turn.